we will be discussing a very interesting concept that many of you have probably sometime in your preparation or length of your answer writing must have been concerned about. And in fact, curiosity on this is almost bordering on indulgence. I've seen students not bother to write up answers, not bother to finish syllabus, but they definitely come back and ask me what some of these words and terms mean. Anyways, these words are otherwise called as question descriptors. They're called as task words or instruction verbs. You have seen a question having words like explain, analyze, describe, state, enumerate, critically analyze, comment, discuss. So these are the words I'm discussing. What do they mean and what should be the approach in answering questions that have these words? And like I said, for many of you it's more a matter of curiosity and a kind of an intellectual debate and discussion rather than actual answer writing. Nevertheless, I hope it benefits you. In very laymanish reference, these words are otherwise referred to as question tails. Why? Because many a times these words come towards the end of the question. Okay, Indian climate has great diversity, explain. Okay, monsoons are the reason for India's agricultural problems, okay, discuss. So these words have come in the later part of the question, but not necessarily. You can also have these words come up in the first, okay, as a first word itself. So even if they're called as question tails, they're not always question tails. The right technical word is, these are called as question descriptors. They describe what is expected of a question. They're also called as task words or called as instruction verbs. Now what I've done is, I have divided the common set of words under 4 categories. The first category, the simplest one, the easiest type, that does not require too much of in-depth thinking or writing. They expect you to treat the question and its content at a very superficial level. So I've called these as the what type or the descriptive type of words. Words that demand that you just describe or maybe just list down. So all these words mean the same. List down something, enumerate something, illustrate something, elaborate something, identify, describe, or simply state. State what are the problems of some issue. Okay. Describe what are the issues that concern us. Enumerate the diversity of something in some place. So these are the simplest ones that do not require in-depth. Okay. And generally, the examiner expects that you may list down using bullets. Maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. List down whatever you have. Now, the next level goes a bit deeper. From what type, you now enter into the why and how type. If I categorize in terms of the level of rigor required, the why and how type continue to be an extension of the descriptive type of answers. So even these are describing, but maybe in a much more detailed way. Okay. They are also trying to account for something, but maybe in a bit more detailed way. So don't just list down what the factors are. Don't just list down what the problems are. You may also describe maybe 2 or 3 sentences with some examples, maybe 1 or 2 data if you can pitch in there to tell us a bit more on why things happen. So a very common word that they use is analyze. The word analyze is something that demands you to look into an issue at a much more deeper level and break it apart. Analysis basically means to take something apart. You take something apart and examine in detail what are the details, aspects of each of the components. So analysis is about looking at things with the intention of explaining why they happen. This is about what happens. This is about why they happen. Now, you come down to a bit more deeper, okay, a bit more rigorous level of answers, which I call as the opinion-based questions or the discussion-based questions. Now, in these type of questions, you not only have to tell us why and how, but you must also have an element of evaluation. You must also sit on judgment. Okay, why things happen and what's the verdict, whether that explanation given by somebody is good enough or maybe not good enough. So these type of questions ask you to judge and tell us what is your appraisal about an issue. So this was what I call as the opinion based questions. And opinion based questions, when they start demanding what is your opinion, okay, what is your personal take on something, then we use the word called as comment. The word comment is essentially, okay, what are your personal views on some issue. Something like, what are the women problems? Explain why the women face those problems. Evaluate what different scholars tell about what they think why women have problems. Comment, what is your opinion on which of the reasoning is best, and what is your opinion on what is more fundamental to women problems. You started with what? You explained something. Then there's an angle of evaluation in terms of priority, which problem comes first. An evaluation in terms of which problems are more justified in terms of bigger concerns. And then the comment, what is your opinion, what is your views, okay, about an issue, and where do you stand in a debate. Okay, another example, what is climate change? Why do we have climate change? Debates on what are the concerns around climate change and what can be the priority. Comment. Now, what do you think should be India's concern? What do you think about the measures taken? What is your take on some of the treaties we have signed? So you have gone from a very superficial level of what towards giving a judgment, and that too a very personalized judgment. Just take caution here. Although the word comment means that you have to give your comment, but ideally speaking, there's nothing like your own comment. Why? Because you are still a student, you are still a learner, you are still naive about many concerns around us. So when we ask you what is your comment, I essentially expect that you give me your comment, but you should be actually telling what somebody's ideas are, and you state that that idea probably is what you stand by. So rather than actually saying what you think, you have to say what is appropriate and justify that that is also your view. One example of which is, for example, I might have a very personal idea about how problems like poverty can be solved. But it is wise that I don't give my idea. I probably quote some UN document. I probably quote some Niti Aayog's summit or meet and what has been the discussion there. I probably quote our Prime Minister, what he thinks is more important. And then say that my opinion is that kind of view is more acceptable. My opinion is that type of a step or a program initiative is what's more appropriate. So even if you are given the freedom to comment on something, please don't end up commenting from your personal limited knowledge about what you think should be happening. I hope I've explained what these words mean. Okay. Now, one of the most abused words, one of the most misused words is the word called discuss. I've seen this word used in questions where actually no discussion is possible. So what does the word discuss mean? The word discuss basically means it's like a conversation. What is one view? What's another view? Okay, what is one factor? What are the other factors? And a kind of debate. So opinion along with evaluation, along with a bit of comment, Then you move on towards maybe describing, explaining some things. All this together is what is called as the discuss type of a question. So discussion is something more elaborate. Discussion is something which is probably encompassing many other forms of instructional verbs. But I've seen questions where even the most simplest, where discussions are not possible, the questions do use these words. So what I judge from this is, the question setters do not always use these words with the intention of demanding this type of treatment from your answer. Sometimes a state type of question might actually be worded as examine type of an question. Sometimes a simple listing type of an answer may demand you to comment where there is no scope of commenting actually. Now, what I mean by this is, the comment type of questions is only possible where there is some element of debate. There is some element of disagreements. There is some element where we can have conversations and we can disagree on something. If there is no discussion or debate possible, then it does not make sense to use words like comment. Despite everything, for example, what are the factors responsible for soil formation? And most of us know all the factors together are climate and bedrock and relief and time and biota. That's more or less what are the factors. So if I ask you, comment on the factors responsible for soil formation, the word comment does not fit in here. Maybe it should have been, enumerate the factors or maybe explain the factors. That makes sense. But comment is too far-fetched in a question like this. Say if I was to ask you, what are the problems of India's agriculture? Now, this is a question that demands debates. This is a question where we can have disagreements on the positions we take in terms of what's the bigger priority in agriculture issues. So there I can definitely mention comment. And comment type of questions are generally phrased in terms of a statement. They'll give you a statement and then ask you, what's your idea? What's your take on this type of a question? So my analysis from this discussion is that even though these words mean something very specific, these words mean something very objective in terms of what's expected out of you, but many times these words are used very loosely in our questions. And the loosely used words are these 4 or 5 of them. They tend to overuse the word discuss. They tend to overuse the word comment. Even words like critically analyze or words like examine. So if you look at some of the questions, it's not possible to discuss certain things beyond what should actually have been a listing or a simple explanation rather than debate on it. Let me give an example to you on this. I'm taking up some of the previous year's questions, and me being the geography teacher, so I definitely prefer discussing geography questions. So a question that they asked in climatology. This was in 2017. The question was, discuss the forces which govern the air movement on the Earth's surface. The word discuss is a very deep concept. The word discuss also includes, as I said, debates. The forces that govern air movement, you really cannot discuss them. At best, you probably can explain them. At best, probably you can maybe elaborate them. You probably can account for them. You probably can analyze the factors that create the winds. But discussion is too deep. But they have used the word discussion here. Another one, it says, discuss as to how frontogenesis contributes to weather instability. Now again, frontogenesis is a very, very technical phenomena, and there are no debates as such on this. They were once upon a time, but now more or less what happens? a cold front, a warm front, interact. So this question should have been explain. This question should have been elaborate, okay, rather than discuss, okay, how frontogenesis becomes the basis of weather instability. So again, I said not the most appropriate word, but they have used it. Or examine this, or look at this one. It says, this is, I'll say, rather more direct. It says, what is polar front? A question from 2010. What is polar front? How does cyclone develop along these fronts? Describe the weather conditions associated with it. This is on the spot. This is perfectly what the question should have been. What is polar front? So I don't say discuss or comment on polar front. And then how does it develop? So straight away how? Explain how. And then it says describe the weather conditions. They just have to tell us for each type of front what type of weather, cold weather front, a warm front, a rainfall, no rainfall, and so on. So some of the questions are spot on. Look at another one that we have. This is from geomorphology. Now this is of course more appropriate. It says, this was in 2018. It says, landscape is a function of structure, process and stage. Critique the statement. This is an example of the comment type of question. They have given a statement that landform is a function of structure, process and stage. So this is a debate. What did Davis mean? Did he do justice to what he said? Okay. Did he really capture the scope of the structure and the processes into discussing landform evolution? So critique is more or less something along the lines of comment. Okay. Look at another question. It says, this is 2016 question. Geological structure has a dominant control on landforms and is reflected on them. I repeat, geological structure has a dominant control on landforms and is reflected on them. Discuss. Now this is very appropriate. You have a statement and then tells us or asks us, tell us what are the views on this. Who says what? Okay. What were the different models? What do you think, okay, is more appropriate? So discussion in this question is perfectly fine. Or look at 2015 question. It says, present day landforms bear more complexity than simplicity. Present day landforms bear more complexity than simplicity. Elucidate, as in explain it, like, as in elaborate on it, as in simplify it and tell us what does this mean. So that's a perfectly fine elaboration and explain type of a question. Now we don't ask this phrased as anything else. So what I'm trying to tell you is the questions have all type of words in them. Appropriately, this is more or less the different categories in terms of the depth of rigor. But then at the end of the question, you should be in a position to judge also whether the question actually demands the way the instructional verb is used. Whether the question actually is expecting you to write on the lines that the task words used in the question are demanding out of you. So don't blindly use those words and move on. And just to illustrate once again, just to explain how they're different, say I take up an issue called as forest. Okay. So for forest, I can say, list down what are the forest types of India. Just give a list. State what are the forest types. Illustrate the different types of forest in different parts of the country. Describe the forests. Tell us which part, what forest, what trees, what are the modifications. So that's the descriptive one. I can go a step beyond. I can ask you, explain the forests. Explain the forests. Now I must go towards the climate. Talk about maybe the slopes. Talk about some historical events through geological time that may have influenced some type of unique forests. So I want explanation. Examine, okay, or appraise. Now, in terms of describing the forest, there is not much of appraisal I can do. Or comment. I really can't comment on the type of forest we have. But yes, if the question was asking, comment on the state of the forests. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they healthy? Not healthy? Are they economically useful? Are they socially relevant? Now the human angle comes in. Definitely I can have analysis now. Now I'm asking you to evaluate what are the steps taken for forest management. So the opinion questions always apply to the questions that demand some kind of a debate. Another one, rocks. What are the rocks? Define rocks. State the diversity of rocks of India. Explain how are they formed. Igneous rocks, metamorphic rocks, sedimentary rocks. Which part of India has what grade of rocks? Now, while writing an answer on the rocks, it is not possible to comment on the rocks. Yes, the comment could have been whether rocks reflect climate or do rocks reflect some other geological process. That's possible. Because some rocks, metamorphic and sedimentary rocks, are the consequence of climatic factors. Or I could comment on rocks and their importance and significance for maybe minerals or some economic issues. So, if they start asking you to comment on something which is more obvious, that cannot be debated, I'll suggest don't get into commenting on that. So, I hope you've understood more or less what these words mean. I could leave the screen for some time. You could note these words down and look at what they actually can be defined as. But the best learning happens when you sit down with a question and try to answer it. And then ask yourself, what does the question actually demand? Is it the superficial type of listing or a bit more deep analysis? And a very nice indicator of what the question demands is look at the marks and look at the time allocated for that question. Even if the question says discuss, but the question actually is 5 marker or 10 marker, you do not have much scope to discuss. Even if the question asks you to comment or evaluate, but the question has a time limit of 5 minutes, you can't really evaluate. So if you are in a doubt as to what the words mean, look up the marks and the time allocated to tell you how your answer may be approached, how the discussion may be written. I hope you get a hang of this. Happy answer writing, happy analyzing questions.